It's 3 a.m. You should be asleep. You were asleep, actually, about 40 minutes ago. But then your brain remembered that thing you said at work 3 days ago. That small, harmless comment that landed in the middle of a meeting and nobody even reacted to. And now, you're lying here in the dark, wide awake, replaying it in high definition. Did it sound rude? Did your boss look at you funny after? Was that why she didn't reply to your message yesterday? Should you send a follow-up email just to smooth it over? Or would that make it weirder? Your phone says 3:07, then 3:23, then 4:11. And somewhere in between, you've mentally rehearsed 6 different versions of an apology for a thing nobody else remembers happening. By the time the sun comes up, you're exhausted. Not because you didn't sleep, because you spent the whole night solving a problem that didn't exist. And the worst part is you know this. You've been here before. You'll be here again. And no matter how many times someone tells you to stop overthinking or just let it go, your brain keeps doing the exact same thing, running the same loops, spinning the same scenarios, turning every small interaction into a 12-part investigation with no conclusion. If this sounds like your life, you need to hear something. You're not crazy. You're not broken. You're not weak-minded or anxious for no reason. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. It's just doing it in a world that doesn't understand what it's for. And once you see what overthinking actually is, from a psychological and neurological standpoint, you'll stop hating yourself for it. Because it turns out, some of your most annoying traits are actually the foundation of some of your most powerful abilities. Let's start with what overthinking really is, because the word gets thrown around so much it's lost its meaning. Overthinking isn't just thinking a lot. It's a specific cognitive pattern where your brain keeps cycling through the same information, trying to find certainty where none exists. Psychologists call this rumination, and the research is clear. Ruminators aren't lazy thinkers or weak people. They're actually processing at a deeper level than most. The problem isn't the depth. The problem is that the brain doesn't know when to stop. Here's what's happening underneath. There's a network in your brain called the default mode network. It's the set of regions that light up when you're not focused on a specific task, when you're daydreaming, reflecting, remembering, or planning. Everyone has one. But in chronic overthinkers, this network is hyperactive. It stays on even when it should be quiet. Research has consistently linked an overactive default mode network with rumination, anxiety, and depression. But here's what nobody tells you. The same hyperactive network is also linked to higher creativity, stronger self-awareness, and deeper emotional insight. Your brain's bug is also its feature. You can't have one without the other. This is why you can't just turn it off. Telling an overthinker to stop overthinking is like telling someone with perfect pitch to stop hearing music. It's not a habit. It's a default setting. And the more you fight it, the louder it gets. There's another piece to this that most people miss. Overthinkers tend to score high in a trait called need for cognition. This is a real psychological measure developed in the 1980s that tracks how much a person enjoys thinking about complex problems. People high in need for cognition are naturally drawn to puzzles, philosophical questions, and detailed analysis. They'd rather read than watch. They'd rather understand than just know. Sound familiar? If you've ever been called too deep or too intense, that's not a personality flaw. That's a measurable trait. And it correlates with better decision-making, stronger academic performance, and more accurate judgment under uncertainty. But here's the catch. The same brain that's built for depth is also built for threat detection. Research shows that overthinkers have heightened activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain that scans for danger. This isn't always physical danger. For modern humans, it's social danger. Rejection, embarrassment, being misunderstood, being disliked. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference between a tiger in the grass and a colleague who didn't respond to your text. It treats both as threats. And your analytical brain, the one built for puzzles, treats that threat like a problem to be solved. This is where things get interesting, because the combination creates something almost no other personality type experiences in the same way. Most people either feel a lot or think a lot. Overthinkers do both at maximum intensity, simultaneously, often about the same thing. That's why a single comment from a friend can hijack your entire evening. Your emotional brain registers it as significant, and your analytical brain starts taking it apart, piece by piece. You're not being dramatic. You're running two high-powered systems at once, and they're both pointed at the same target. So what happens? You combine a brain that loves deep analysis with a nervous system that sees social risk everywhere, and you get a loop. Small event happens. Amygdala tags it as potentially dangerous. Analytical brain tries to solve it, but there's nothing to solve because the event was already over. So it keeps trying and trying. At 3 a.m., the loop doesn't end because it was never built to end. It was built to keep you safe by running every scenario until it finds certainty. And certainty, when it comes to how other people feel about you, doesn't exist. Now let's talk about why this is actually a strength, because this is the part nobody ever explains. Overthinkers have something most people don't have, which is the ability to consider multiple outcomes simultaneously. You don't just think about what will happen, you think about what could happen. 7 different versions of it. Researchers who study decision-making call this counterfactual thinking, the ability to imagine alternatives to reality. And studies have shown that people who engage in more counterfactual thinking tend to learn from their experiences faster, plan more effectively, and anticipate obstacles that others miss entirely. Think about that for a second. The brain you've been hating, the one that won't let you sleep because it's running simulations, is the same brain that has probably saved you from countless bad decisions. You don't walk into situations blind. You don't say yes to things without thinking them through. You don't get blindsided the way other people do, because your brain has already rehearsed every possibility. The cost is that you can't always shut it off. The benefit is that you're rarely unprepared. There's also something called meta-cognition, which is a fancy word for thinking about your own thinking. Overthinkers are world-class at this. You don't just have thoughts, you observe them, analyze them, question them, and turn them over like evidence in a trial. Most people are mostly unaware of their own mental patterns. You're painfully aware. And while that awareness can feel like a curse when it's aimed at your own flaws, it's also the foundation of almost every kind of personal growth. The only reason people ever change is because they first noticed what they were doing. You've been noticing your whole life. That's a head start, not a handicap. And metacognition doesn't just help you change yourself. It makes you a better reader of other people. When you understand your own patterns deeply, you start to recognize them in others. You notice when a friend is deflecting instead of answering. You pick up on the difference between what someone says and what they mean. You can often tell when a person is lying to themselves before they can. That's not mind reading. That's pattern recognition built from years of watching your own mind run. It's why overthinkers often end up being the ones their friends come to for advice, even when those friends don't realize why. You see them clearly because you've spent so much time learning to see yourself. Here's something else that won't surprise you, but might finally make sense of your life. Overthinkers tend to be highly sensitive, not emotionally fragile, but neurologically reactive. Research on the trait called sensory processing sensitivity has found that about 20% of the population has a nervous system that processes stimuli more deeply than average. These are the people who notice small changes in a room, who hear things others don't, who pick up on the tiny shift in someone's tone that says something's wrong, even before the person says anything. If you've ever walked into a room and instantly known the mood had shifted, that's not a coincidence. That's a measurable trait. And it comes bundled with a brain that processes everything more thoroughly, including its own thoughts. So now let's put it all together. You have a brain wired for depth, a nervous system wired for sensitivity, a reward system that gets satisfaction from understanding things fully, and a threat detection system that fires a little too often. Of course you overthink. How could you not? Every part of your brain is built to notice, analyze, and evaluate. The problem isn't that you're doing something wrong. The problem is that you live in a world that treats your default mode as a malfunction. Let's talk about how this shows up in your daily life, because I want you to recognize yourself in this clearly. You send a text and immediately reread it 5 times. You replay conversations hours after they happen, picking apart word choices. You can't just go with your gut on decisions. Every option has to be weighed and then reweighed. You notice when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes. You remember things people said to you years ago that they've long forgotten. You predict conflict before it happens, and when it does, you've already thought through 4 ways to handle it. You feel things more intensely than most people admit to feeling them. You question yourself in ways that would surprise the people who think you're confident. And every once in a while, someone tells you you're overcomplicating it, and you wonder if they're right, while simultaneously knowing they're missing something you can see and they can't. This isn't anxiety, though it can coexist with it. This is just how your brain is engineered. And there's something important to understand about the relationship between overthinking and anxiety, because they're often confused. Anxiety is the emotional state. Overthinking is the cognitive pattern that sometimes feeds it, and sometimes just exists on its own. You can be an overthinker without being anxious. Plenty of deep thinking, analytical, reflective people go through life completely at peace with their own minds. The key isn't silencing the thinking, it's changing your relationship to it. Here's what researchers who study cognitive behavioral therapy have found. The people who suffer most from overthinking aren't the ones who think the most. They're the ones who believe their thoughts the most. The difference is massive. If you have 100 thoughts a day and you treat all of them as facts, you'll be exhausted by noon. If you have 100 thoughts a day and you treat them as information, data your brain is generating, not verdicts it's delivering, you can think as much as you want without it destroying you. The goal was never to stop thinking. The goal is to stop confusing thinking with truth. There's another reframe that changes everything once you understand it. Overthinking is your brain's way of trying to love you. That sounds strange, but follow me here. The reason your brain keeps running scenarios at 3 a.m. isn't because it hates you, it's because it's trying to protect you. It's scanning for threats, rehearsing outcomes, and preparing you for things that might go wrong, all so you don't get hurt. The mechanism is clumsy, the intention is protective. Your brain isn't trying to torture you, it's trying to keep you safe in a world where most of the threats are social and invisible. Once you see it that way, it's harder to hate. You don't have to thank your brain for keeping you up at night, but you can stop treating it like an enemy. And when you stop treating it like an enemy, something shifts. The thoughts don't necessarily slow down, but they stop feeling so heavy, because the weight of overthinking isn't really the thinking itself, it's the layer of judgment on top of it. The voice that says, why can't I just let this go like normal people? The shame that says, I'm being dramatic. The frustration that says, this is exhausting and I hate myself for it. When you take that layer away, when you let your brain do what it does without adding self-criticism on top, overthinking becomes something you do, not something that defines you. It's just how your mind moves. Some minds sprint, some minds wander, yours investigates. None of them are wrong. And let's address something that overthinkers live with quietly. The feeling that you're too much or too intense. The sense that other people seem to move through life more easily, that they can let things go without dissecting them, that their minds are quieter, calmer, more accepting. And so you wonder if something is fundamentally wrong with you for not being like them. Here's the truth. You're not broken. You're just not shallow. And shallowness, for all it makes life feel simpler, also makes it smaller. People who don't overthink also tend to miss things. They miss nuance. They miss red flags. They miss opportunities to grow. You don't miss those things. You catch almost everything. That's not a curse. That's a rare kind of attention. And the world needs people who pay attention. Think about the people who have changed your life in meaningful ways. The therapist who actually understood you. The friend who remembered a detail you mentioned months ago. The writer whose words felt like they were written just for you. The artist whose work made you feel seen. Every single one of those people was an overthinker. They noticed, they reflected, they considered. They felt things deeply enough to put them into words or images or decisions that changed other people's lives. The world is built by overthinkers. It just doesn't always credit them. So let me say this directly. The brain you've been apologizing for is the brain that notices what others miss. The mind you've been trying to quiet is the mind that connects dots no one else sees. The sensitivity you've been calling weakness is the same sensitivity that makes you empathic, observant, and deeply human. You don't need to become someone who doesn't think. You need to become someone who stops feeling guilty for thinking. There's a difference. You're not behind because your brain doesn't shut off. You're ahead because it doesn't. You see more, understand more, process more, and feel more than most people ever will. The exhaustion you feel isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's the natural cost of a mind that refuses to live on the surface. And the life you build with a mind like that, slow, considered, intentional, is not a failure to keep up. It's a refusal to live shallow. So the next time you're at 3 a.m., replaying that comment from a meeting nobody else remembers, try something different. Don't tell yourself to stop. Don't fight the loop. Just notice what's happening. Notice that your brain is trying to protect you. Notice that it's doing what it was built to do. Notice that you're the kind of person who cares enough to think this hard about a single sentence. And then, if you can, be a little grateful. Not for the sleeplessness, but for the depth underneath it. Because shallow minds don't lose sleep over the people they might have hurt. Only the people who care do. If this video felt like someone finally got it, subscribe. This channel was built for brains like yours. The ones that never stop thinking. The ones that notice everything. The ones that have spent a lifetime being told to be less, when the whole time the world just never understood what more actually looked like. You're not overthinking. You're just thinking at a depth most people don't even know exists.